Alright guys, I'm back from vacation. During vacation, I was thinking of the I Need a Warm palette. I decided not to get it because because I was away, I was not going to be able to get a review real quick to you guys. And second, I was thinking that I have created plenty of warm looks from the palettes that I have already, so do I actually even need it? When I got the golden palette, I was disappointed because I already had half of the shades. But then eventually I started to love the golden palette as a standalone palette. So it is possible that if I were to get I Need a Warm, I might really love it as a standalone palette. But I'm just not feeling ready to spend that money at this time. I think I want to wait for the holiday release from Natasha Denona. I feel excited for that one. But today I wanted to see if I can create my own I Need a Warm palette from within my Natasha Denona collection. I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube, Angela Bright, Patty Alonso, a couple of other creators to kind of get the feel of this palette. I also looked at their comparisons and I played around with these shades for a good, I would say, a couple of hours. And I created a nice little chart while I was going through and testing out all of these different shades, looking at the screen. And while I might not be able to completely replicate the I Need a Warm palette, I feel like I will be able to create a palette that is warm toned with neutral leaning. So let's get started. I'm going to put up a picture here of I Need a Warm, and we're going to go through shade by shade and create our very own I Need a Warm palette. So the first shade in this palette is Soft Spot. This is a matte medium earthy brown, and I found two similar shades, one from the bronze palette here, and I'm going to show you the shade Suntan. If you look at this shade Suntan, I mean, it looks very earthy to me, and it looks brown. And when I say earthy, I feel like there's like warmth to it, like a slight redness to it. Here is the swatch. I think this is a good substitute for Soft Spot. Another one that I considered was from the Dream palette. This shade right here, Carpe Diem. This also, when I think of this shade, I think of the earth, but it's definitely a bit lighter. And maybe there's slight pinkness to it, very slight. I would still consider this pretty earthy and warm leaning. But for this shade, I would say the one from the bronze palette is a really good substitute. I'm actually going to go ahead and pop this one out of the palette. And what I did was I emptied out my Retro Glam palette, and I'm going to stick it in there because I really want to be able to compare the palettes side by side and see if my own palette looks same as Natasha Denona's. I mean, they're both going to be Natasha Denona, but you know, you get the picture. Here you go, the first one in. Now the second shade is called Fancy. It's a metallic champagne shade. The second shade I felt like was very like super light and bright peachy shade. And if you're going to the golden palette and if you look at this shade Fizzy, I feel like it has that sort of peachiness to it. It's very light, but it's there. Like I can see the warmth in Fizzy versus some of the other golden shades which are more golden. All right, let's look at that. Like, do you see that sort of reflective, slight peachiness in this shade? Some of the other ones that I also thought about were from the Love palette, I think. There's this Lifetime shade. You can kind of even see it in the pan. This is kind of peachy. But it's definitely like darker, and I would say it's even more peachier. So I would go with Fizzy because I felt like the peachiness and fizzy is just much lighter and represents the fancy shade from I Need a Warm much better. I also looked at the Glam palette, and if you look at, I would say inner corner, like this one right here. This one I would say is a little bit more cooler leaning, whereas the fizzy one from the Golden palette I feel like is a little bit more warmer. I'm gonna go with fizzy. We're gonna pop fizzy out. And we're gonna drop it in right here. Okay, up next is the shade Mellow, which is a matte, light, peachy nude. I am reaching into the Golden palette again. And for that one, how about this shade called Panna? Is Panna? Maybe you could see it better on my finger here. Like, I would consider this kind of warmer leaning, super light cream shade. And I feel like the one from I Need a Warm was also very, very light. But in some swatches, it came out looking very dark, which I thought was really odd. This one right here called First. I feel like the Love palette might be a little bit more pinky. It's when you look at the one from the Love palette and compare it to the original one, that's when you actually start to see the peachiness in this original one from the Golden palette. But there is another one, if it turns out that this shade is actually darker, because some swatches it looked darker, some it looked lighter. So I don't really know how this is actually gonna turn out. Then we also have this option here. Same from the Golden palette. Both of these shades from the Golden palette, the first one, which is lighter, the second one, which is a little bit darker, they look peach to me. Like, the Golden palette is not all cool tones. There is warmth in that palette. Now for this one, I'm gonna go with Panna, but I feel like you could also go with Flesh from the Golden palette. Either of those are really nice, like peachy, warmer leaning shades. Right, here we have the third one. The fourth shade is called Phenomena, and it's a multi-chrome peach pink green. Now, there's no such multi-chrome in my collection, but looking at the swatches, you saw more of the peach than the pink or the green. So I think this Invention shade from the My Dream palette, like, I actually saw more of this bronziness, this peachy bronzy, than the other shades from the multi-chrome. Angela Bright pointed out, which is Alloy from the Bronze palette, which is also this very reflective, peachy, bronzy kind of shade. Alloy seems more orangey, and the other one seems a little bit more bronzy, reddish. I'm gonna go with the other one from the My Dream palette. And that's called Invention. Dropping in the fourth shade. Oops. What do you guys think so far? Last one in this row is called Ripe, and it's a matte, light, medium peach brown. I didn't see much brown when it comes to the swatches that I saw. It looked very peachy to me, so I'm gonna go with Unity from My Dream palette. I feel like My Dream palette does have a good amount of warmer shades. Here it is. Another one that you could consider is Wit, the nude palette, or I Need a Nude palette. Here is Unity and Wit. That's it. So I'm gonna go with Unity from My Dream palette. Is this looking warm to you? Is it looking similar to the I Need a Warm, or is it looking completely different? Now, looking at the pans, these two look very like yellow and not that peachy, but when you look at the swatches, you do see the peachiness in these two. Sometimes Natasha's pans are deceiving. When you swatch, the shade looks completely different. All right, here is the first row, and we can compare it to the swatches for the first row of the actual palette. All right, the next shade is called Elm, which is a sparkling foiled light bronzy nude. When I looked at the swatches online, I didn't see the bronze. When I look at that shade, it looks very golden to me. So I think a shade from the golden palette should work. Something maybe like this one right here, Kava. And then the next shade is called Snug, which is a metal gloss soft bronze. I feel like you can find something bronze from the bronze palette for sure. This one called Alloy. Next one is called Vim, which is a matte, deep, warm brown. So I need something warm and I need something brown. And I think a good one is from the My Dream palette. If you look at the shade Familia, I mean, when I look at this, I see warmth and I see brown. Next shade is called Push, which is a sparkling foiled medium rusty rose gold. So for something that is rose gold, I was thinking that it would be in like a rosy palette, like I Need a Nude, like maybe this Sheen shade, a really beautiful rose gold shade. But then when I was looking at the swatches, I don't know if I actually saw rose gold. And from Angela Bright's video where she did the swatches, she was saying that silk is a good match. So I don't know, I don't see a whole lot of rose gold in silk, so I don't know. Which one should we go with? I feel like silk is pretty basic, so I think I'm gonna take Sheen. It's definitely hard to swatch this shade because it's so silky and thin. And then the last shade for this row is Fervor, a matte medium warm caramel. How about the Carpe Diem one from here? This is the My Dream palette. Again, you know, I think I said this before, I feel like there's actually a lot of warm shades in My Dream palette. Here they are. This is the second row. All right, let's actually pop them out and put it in the second row. So I'm going to take Kanva out. Let's take Kanva out into the first one. Bronze palette. And we're going to take out, we're gonna take this one, Familia. Oh, I don't know. Should I like trust Angela Bright and go with the silk, or should I do the Sheen one? I think I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna go with the silk just because she did a side-by-side comparison and this looked very similar. So I think for the rose gold shade, I'll take silk. And the last one is from My Dream palette. That's Carpe Diem here. I do want to point out that when I was doing the first row, there was some daylight outside, so there was some natural lighting, but now that it's nighttime, this is all white ring light. But I mean, the palette looks pretty much the same, I feel like, as it did in the natural light. But here it is. So far, 2 rows. This is what it's looking like. Again, some of these things look deceiving. Like, this looks very golden, but it's actually more bronzy. This is definitely golden for sure. This one is not golden. It's more like peachy, very light peach. All right, on to the last row. The last row shade is called Pep, which is a matte, deep, warm brown. So when we look at the bronze palette, the one that stands out to me is the shade called Magna. Here is the swatch. And I know this maybe looks a little cool tone, but looking at the swatches of the I Need a Warm palette, this shade does look pretty cool tone to me. The next shade is called Homey, and it's a metal gloss warm nude. And for that, I am gonna go back into the golden palette, and I think this Nubia shade looked very similar to the swatches that I saw. Here it is. Let's actually take those 2 shades out. So it's Magma from the bronze palette. And it's Nubia from the golden palette. The next one is called Hanker, which is a metallic medium dark golden brown. So if it's golden, I'm going to go look in the golden palette, and this shade right here called Varus I think matches it really well. Let's pop that one out. Next shade is called Dynamism, and it's a duochrome medium brown with green specks. I didn't really see any green specks or the duochrome nature. You know, Natasha Denona's duochromes, multi-chromes are not the most noticeable. I mean, I did like the one from the My Dream palette, but the ones in this palette don't seem that noticeable to me. So I think going back to the My Dream palette, I think this Baby's shade actually looks very similar. All right, the last one is called Flashover, which is a slip cream matte medium clay brown. And for that one, I put down this one, which is Familia from My Dream palette, and I mean, they look very similar to me. Like, there are some shades in the I Need a Warm palette that are similar to each other. So, but if I had to pick something else, there's nothing like a medium warm brown in the retro palette. There's no other medium brown in the bronze palette. I mean, from the bronze palette, 1, 2, 3, 4, I used 4 shades. I mean, this teak here in the golden palette, it's not a medium brown. I feel like it's a little bit lighter. And from the golden palette, so far I've taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shades out. Nothing else left in the My Dream palette. And from the My Dream palette, I took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shades. Let's just look at the Glam palette. I mean, Smoke. Maybe Smoke looks a little bit more cooler tone. So... and this one, Outer Eyelid, looks like a shimmer shade. Yeah, and it looks cooler tone too. So nothing in the Glam palette. So I don't think there's anything else. Here's a Love palette. So I think Familia is the right shade for it, but I don't want to leave that blank, so I think I'm gonna go with the next best thing. And I'm gonna use this teak because it does give me very warm vibes. It might not be the same as the I Need a Warm palette, but I wouldn't mind having this shade in a warm palette. So we're just kind of going to go with that one. Here it is. All right, let's take teak out. I feel like this actually looks warmer than the actual I Need a Warm palette. What do you guys think? So it turns out if you have these 3 palettes, then you don't really need I Need a Warm. So if you have the golden palette, from which I took 6 shades. 6 shades from the golden palette. If you have the My Dream palette, from which I took 5 shades. And then if you have the bronze palette, from which I took 4 shades. So if you have these 3 palettes, then you might not actually need to get the I Need a Warm palette. So for my last test, I am going to do all the swatches for this, and then we're going to compare it to all the swatches for I Need a Warm. And then in another video, and also maybe in shorts or my community tab, I will use this palette and create looks with it, so that we can see if the looks look similar to the looks from I Need a Warm palette. Starting off with the first shade. Here's the second shade. Here's the third one. Again, the first row, but I'm going to continue putting on the other shades here too. And then it's the shade Snug, shade Vim, and then we have the shade Push, and then the last one from this row is the shade Fervor. All right, moving on to the last row. I'm kind of running out of space. So here are the shades. This is all 15 shades. All right, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Do you have the other 3 palettes that I used to create this palette? If you do have those other 3 palettes, do you think that creating your own palette like this is sufficient? Or do you feel like I Need a Warm is still different and that it's worth getting the new palette? Let me know in the comments down below. And again, you guys know I'm a big Natasha Denona fan, and if you like that brand's content, then make sure to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.